What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Theology in the Dirt. We're trying to practice our theology in the public square of our homes, our city, and our world. We do this for Three Rivers Church and friends who are tracking with us. We hope you find Theology in the Dirt helpful. You can get sermon notes, links to the rest of our podcast at theologyinthedirt.com. I'm Mitchell Jolly.
And I'm Chris Hayes.
Yo, dude, what is good, man? What's going on?
I'm going to tell you what's good is the beach was good. I just got back from vacation on Wednesday evening down in
nice.
Good old Panama City Beach, Florida.
Yes.
Beautiful weather.
Yeah, dude.
The
nice Redneck condo. Riviera.
Yeah, still some of that. But
it's awesome, though.
But some of us can afford Destin and some of the nicer areas. It's actually really not bad.
No,
like
it's not.
Like it was kind of, I would say, mid 2000s and even like 90s and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Beach project days for you, right?
Yeah. So the cool story about that. So there, I spent 3 summers down there, 10 weeks each. So I spent, not counting vacations, 30 weeks of my life down there. Much more than that if you count vacations and stuff like that through the years. But work different jobs. So it's fun going around showing like Addison, my daughter, for those listening, like, hey, Daddy worked at that Taco Bell or that Winn-Dixie or Boardwalk Beach Resort. So awesome. One of my favorite things, my favorite ice cream place probably in the world, there's a homemade ice cream shop down close to like the little arcade area, kind of down the strip a little ways, kind of tucked in. And they have beach project pictures dating back to like the 90s.
That's awesome.
Of like every summer. And so cool. I haven't been the last few years we've been there, and I've been meaning to. And so we went after playing putt-putt one night, and Addison and I went in there. I showed her pictures of me on 3 of those.
Dude, that's awesome.
And it was pretty cool. They still have them in there.
Really?
I was there 01, 02, and 03. Wow. And so they have them, I think they had project pictures up through like 07, 08. And then that may have been the time where they moved it to Daytona. I think they moved it out of Panama City.
Oh, really? Beach Project? They don't do it in
because we used to have 2. There used to be one on the west end, which is where Barry, where ours was. Yeah. And they had one on the eastern end, kind of down towards like Thomas Drive, Captain Anderson's, that side of the beach. And so there'd be like 2 pictures from each summer. So that it was just cool though that they're still there, and it's homemade ice cream, so it's delicious.
That's awesome.
But, so good trip. Looking a little more tan. That's why. Don't be jealous. Don't hate on it.
That's right, man.
Can't turn down the handsome sometimes. And I'm gonna get struck by lightning. Sorry.
You came back definitely full
back
of
on a beach high.
You did indeed. You're on a beach high. That's awesome. Man. Well, I'm glad y'all had a good trip.
What about you? What's good?
Well, man, it's I'm totally gonna ratchet up the the tone here. I'm glad it's July because Pride Month is over. I was so sick of Pride Month and the clown show that is Pride Month. I produced that's a horrible word. I made a little video and posted it, sent it to Three Rivers people. Because that's primarily what we do this for, is for Three Rivers Church people to have access to us trying to critically think through living out our faith in the public square. And we have friends all over the world who listen in and are partners, and we're grateful for that. But I wrestled with Pride Month this year like I haven't in a long time, primarily because for me, I'm trying to draw this distinction between what Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 2, where he told him to be gentle when dealing with people who are caught in this trap of sin because they've been taken captive by the enemy, the devil, to do his will. People who are caught in that lie versus systemic movements like After the Ball. You guys know I pound that drum of that book After the Ball from the 90s by Kirk and Madsen, because it's the playbook that has been enacted sociologically to make normative what is so not normative. And so I just read a passage out of it toward the end about the anger and the rage out of which they are to operate from, and why we as Christians, that's not our tact.
Right.
And so, because that's the dark kingdom's methodology. And so, I put that because I wanted our people to be able to think through what does the text of the scripture say. Because like one of the things I said in the video is like pulling up all the Bible verses. Like I don't need to do that. You can go Google those, Bible search those. They're there. People say it's not in the Bible, it's just not paying attention. Right. And don't play the game Jesus versus the God of the Old Testament, because Jesus said he was the God of the is the God of the Old Testament. So anyway, I'm glad that month's over, but it's going to come around next year. And I find it interesting that I think there's an awakening of people to the ugliness and underbelly of that movement. And so that's good to see. I'm glad the month's over. Glad we were able to put a little bit out there for our folks to think through. And one other good thing for me is what's good, man, is I was looking at the old Twitstagram, and we're talking today about RFK.
Sorry,
that was just a senior adult moment too, wasn't it? The Twitstagram.
That's like the Walmarts or the
Walmarts, Kroger's. Yeah. Yes, absolutely, and the Walmarts. You get the definite article, but.
Boomer.
So we're talking about RFK Jr. Today, and because we've done Biden, we've done Trump in this election cycle, we're talking some politics along the way. So we want to cover RFK Jr. But I'll say more about him in just a moment. But this wins Twitter today for me, and I really appreciate what he said here, because one of the things I love about Kennedy is he's not in anybody's pocket. He's not owned by anybody, and he can just kind of say stuff, and I appreciate it. Here's what he said. My take on 9/11. It's hard to tell what is a conspiracy theory and what isn't. But this is the part that I found fascinating, because it's true. But conspiracy theories flourish when the government routinely lies to the public. As president, I won't take sides on 9/11 or any other debates, but I can promise I will open the files and usher in a new era of transparency. And one of the things I appreciate about him is that, because the truth of the matter is, if it's a government, we've talked about this before, if it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people, then why is our government hiding things from us? And so the truth of the matter is, there should be no thing that we can't have access to and read. Why? The question is why, and so I appreciate that about him, because he's got some incredible things to say about the death of his uncle and his father. And so anyway, that's what's good. I thought that was an incredible tweet, and appreciated that. And so that's what's good in my world, man. So today we're going to talk about Robert Kennedy Jr. So Chris, what you got? Lead us out, man.
All right, let's jump into it. Well, first, he's our third candidate, right? So for those who don't know, RFK is the young guy out of the group at only 69 years of age. He's the nephew to former President John F. Kennedy, the son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy Sr. And while he's traditionally been a Democrat, he chose to run as an independent in this election. Now, granted, he tried to run against Biden first. He wanted to be on the Democratic ticket.
Yeah.
When that was clear that was not going to happen, decided to go independent. Has kind of continuously bashed the two-party system as a rigged system, which with that, I agree. I think it's just set up to fail.
Right.
A little bit of background. I'm not going to go into a lot today. He spent more than 20 years as an environmental lawyer, focusing on things like clean water, human rights, other environmental issues.
Right.
Had a rough kind of growing up, had some issues with some drugs and arrests and things early in his life, got it together, went to Harvard and got some other degrees. You can check out his Wikipedia page. You may have some more information in the background, but in a nutshell, that's kind of what it's mentioned. It's funny you mentioned the whole thing about conspiracy theorists, because by nature, RFK kind of is one, in a certain extent, not so much like crazy things, but like he's been labeled at one. Let me put it that way. He's been labeled a conspiracy theorist kind of guy because of his thoughts and opinions on the COVID vaccine. Certainly put him in hot water. He was even banned on Instagram for statements that the vaccine causes autism and other anti-vaccine messaging, which is kind of ironic now because there's more and more information coming out about the negatives of the impact of the vaccine, especially for children.
I'll definitely have more to say about that momentarily.
I figured you would. He's also because he kind of turned to COVID from some of the climate environment issues. That was kind of where he kind of changed his stance on things, and so it's really interesting because, and I made a note on this because the fact that so many American people are fed up with both major party options.
Yeah.
They're showing RFK polling at or around 10% for most of this election cycle, which may sound low, but get this. No independent candidate has received a double-digit percentage of votes on Election Day since Ross Perot in 1992.
Yeah.
And I think there's a decent chance. My gut, and I'll get to this later, my gut says he falls short of that, but I don't think it would be surprising if he hit that double-digit number or somewhere in there, just because I think there's enough, and I think it's going to get worse, the Biden versus Trump, just old man at the park bench fighting kind of stuff.
Sure.
That's eventually going to just drive some people to say, I just don't want either of them to win. I don't really care what happens to the country. I just don't want.
Right.
And I get that. So one of the things that Kennedy stands on, particularly for the economy, because I think we've addressed this in the last two. The economy for most Americans is, if not number one, it's certainly up there. Mm-hmm. It's how do we afford stuff? Right. How are we going to pay for things? He's more focused on an economy that's not centered around Wall Street, more of individual economies and families working together.
Sure.
But he wants to raise the minimum wage to $15. He wants to expand free child care programs and lower housing costs by $1,000 per family. I've gone on record with about the $15 minimum wage thing. I just don't think that's going to work anywhere.
Right.
I get why they're trying to push for that. California tried it. But what happens is eventually, because unless your costs shrink and your prices go up, assuming you're in some kind of sales or profit company, then eventually you're going to have to pull from the top to feed the bottom.
Right.
And if you raise the floor and lower the ceiling, you're going to lose good people, and it's going to eventually hurt your business.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so I don't think there's a way for that to succeed in the way that they're believing it.
Yeah. And the idea of paying $15 an hour for a teenager's first job,
right,
is to do something that is not a skilled position is tough for a business owner.
Yeah.
If you're a major corporation, you can probably swing that. I mean, your expenses are going to go up. But if you're a small business, it's going to force small businesses out. I don't understand how.
$7 and change is probably too low, but I think 15 is way too high. I think maybe push it closer to 9. That's probably more doable, or tier it based off of age.
I'm trying to remember my first job where I actually got paid where I had to be taxed. First few jobs I got paid in cash, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. But $3.16 an hour at Chick-fil-A Riverbend Mall, Rome, Georgia. It was awesome.
$3.16. Chick-fil-A, way to go.
Hey, that was what it was back in the day, man. So, yeah.
Little John, $3.16. Those Christians.
Christian chicken, Christian minimum wage. That's brilliant.
That's funny.
I never made that correlation. Probably because I was going to hell when I had that job, but that's pretty good.
Which let's go into this question for you while we're talking about the economy.
Yeah.
Because I think we talked about this. We certainly need to be looking at politics and view things from a Christian standpoint, a biblical perspective.
Right.
And I think at some point, though, does it come to the point where you're just like, my vote really has nothing to do with my being a Christian, and it's just, I just want what's going to be best for my family. And if you get to that point, is that bad? Is that good? I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say, but because I'm not saying that those two are not the same. Like you can't, but families are struggling, and at some point, I could understand saying some of these other issues just don't matter. I just want to be able to afford groceries and gas.
Right. I don't think there's any way possible for a Christian to divorce their faith from their practice. Otherwise, faith without works is dead. Part of James' whole premise is, and James, not Paul, people play James against Paul. And James said, you show me your faith, I'll show you my works. I'll show you my faith by my works. I think there's a component of how we practice the stewardship of the privilege of being able to vote has to be a reflection of our faith. And what's great is our faith doesn't ignore economics.
Right.
There's the Old Testament is clear. There's actually applications of the law in regard to debt, in regard to ownership of property, rights of property, and paying what you owe, and not withholding wages. I mean, these things are important, and so God has a standard economically. So I don't know. I think we can apply that standard in what we do.
Yep.
I think the question is for us, what are our best options in the application of that standard? And sometimes it may be a vote against more than 4, and that's okay also, because there's a better, one not getting it is going to be better than the one who might get it. So sometimes our vote might be against rather than for. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I'm voting for this candidate in order to make sure that one doesn't ever get to apply that communist theory in in a constitutional republic. And so, but I think that also in and of itself is an application of our faith in going, this right here is better from God's perspective and the application of things God cares about than this one is. So I'm going to, and that in truth is kind of how I'm having to come at these three candidates in regard to the issue of life.
Yeah. You know? I find that interesting because, and I'm glad you pointed that out about the voting against, because I think if we asked every American voter, legal voter, not the ones who vote anyway, or
all the dead people that vote,
magic votes, but I think if you asked them one-on-one, honest, like it got honest answers, I wouldn't shock me if over 90% of people were voting for someone because they're against someone. Christians, non-Christians, born here, came here from other countries, whatever it might be.
Right.
The majority of people voting for Trump are voting against Biden. The majority of people voting for Biden are voting against Trump. And I would say for RFK, the vast majority of people voting for him are voting against both. Yeah. In some shape or form. Do you feel like that's fair?
I think it's fair, and I will say from even inside my own home, some of our debate, we have very robust debates in the Jolly household over supper time. We when the boys were growing up, we did a lot of discussing. We wanted our times around the table to be times of learning to think critically, and so we talked about theology and practice after theology and social issues, and so we have some pretty robust conversations, and some of our conversation has revolved around the reality that there are certain things that if we don't take care of in our constitutional republic, we're not going to have the privilege of having these other things later. So can I, at this point, because we don't have a good option on this issue X, is it better to vote for this option because this option at least is going to preserve the opportunity in 4 years to now come back to addressing that issue, if that makes sense? Mm-hmm. We're having those discussions because it's not always simple and easy, and particularly in this election. Like this election, there's a lot of things on the line historically, and it's not just a one issue thing. And I don't know that people who don't pay attention to their local elections and then of course the national elections may have a tendency to think it's merely about the economy.
Right.
And it is about the economy, but that is intertwined with so many other issues that you kind of have to begin teasing those out and go, okay, on this issue, can we afford to not address this so that we can come back in 4 years, then have the opportunity, maybe margin to go, we've got to come. Now we can come back to this. And I think that's a legitimate debate. And I'm being very vague because I don't want to out anybody, but I think it's legitimate. It's a legitimate debate. Can we afford to not vote for this candidate in order to preserve the republic? Because I really think we're at a place of preserving the republic, frankly. Mm-hmm. If you take the fourth turning and you read that historical analysis of where we are historically right now, it's a fascinating book. If folks hadn't read it, I encourage you to go get. There's the fourth turning, and then its follow-up is the fourth turning is here, and fantastic historical analysis from the Middle Ages or the medieval times to now. History follows repeated patterns. Right. And it even deals with the theory of, is history cyclical or is it linear? It's a fantastic read. It's not an easy read, but it's a fascinating read. And we're at the end of a cycle that's been repeated and actually cataloged historically. It's marked by difficult things. And so we experienced that in the Civil War. That came back around again a little early, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Now we're, strangely enough, we're coming to the backside of another historical period that's marked by some turmoil. And the question for us is, as a constitutional republic, where are we as a constitutional republic, and can we survive the economic, sociological, and global issues that are in front of us? And I know I'm not making that sound doomsday, but there's some serious issues in front of us that matter. Mm-hmm. And man, this one's important.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of what you would call maybe political experts who actually believe RFK would do the best job for the country. Yeah. But because of the belief that there's no way a third party candidate can win, is not going to ever get the votes, and because of the just unbelievable amount of polarization that the other two candidates bring, it's going to be hard for him to overcome that.
Sure.
So I want to circle back to that towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so there's two things that really have made RFK stand out, and then one that's really kind of hurt some things. And I want to focus in on that third thing. So the two things that really have made him popular amongst voters is, number one, he's got a strong stance on securing the border, as Trump does, and would focus on doing that rather quickly. That's got a lot of popularity for him. And then really even more so is his foreign politics perspective, because he's adamant about us wanting to stop running up the national debt to give so much aid to countries like Ukraine, and instead focus on diplomatic solutions to help them find resources. So not ignore them completely, but we can't just continue running up trillions in debt, sending that much money over to other countries when there are so many needs here. Which even I think among a lot of the Democrat circles, they're coming around on that too. They're realizing we got to stop sending so much money, not just money, but weapons and technology and all this kind of stuff to other countries.
That's basically fighting a proxy war. It's somewhere between a Cold War and a hot war, and fighting a proxy war with an enemy. And it's a legitimate debate. I mean, is Russia still a Cold War enemy, or is Russia an economic challenge that needs to be handled diplomatically? That's actually a political debate that's worth having. Like, are we still operating on a Cold War doctrine, or are we post-Cold War in a different age in which the doctrine has to shift in regard to how you think about Russia and China? And are we pushing Russia toward China? Because that's a horrible combination. They actually don't get along real well. But if what's the old saying? It's like, if both of you have a common enemy, you can find yourself friends. I know I didn't say that right, but we don't want Russia and China being friends.
Certainly
we're forcing them into friendship, and that's devastatingly bad.
Well, and again, I know we talked about Biden, so I don't want to spend much time on him because we talked about him last time. But the truth of the matter is, he's not a strong leader from what the world's perspective. Like, there's no fear of him in the leader. There's no really respect for that. I heard some guys talking the other day, not guys, I mean like legitimate, like government type guys, saying that under his watch, we have lost 7 U.S. embassies around the world. And when I mean lost like control of them, like they're just been banned. Yeah. And I mean, there's never been anywhere near that number. I don't even think there's been more than one under any other president. And one of the things that Trump does, whether it's out of people because they're afraid of him because they think he's crazy, is at least there was a fear of him leading America. There was a much stark difference of the outward view of the country. Sure. I think people still thought America's dumb or they're crazy. Look who's right. Not so much a respect for him, but a respect of like, we're afraid to mess with that country. Sure. Because of what he might do. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing, but I think it's not a good thing either to be looked at as weak and passive when you're a world power. No. And so I think RFK leans more to the side of Trump, where I don't know that necessarily he's like the crazy man with his hand on the button view as he would. We're not going to let you just overrun our country either. Yeah. He
would be very much the Ron Paul kind of guy that says that really, in fact, RFK's position is he wants to close, if not all, the majority of the United States bases around the world that have been established through wars we fought. And I actually don't agree with him on that. I think, number one, having a presence where you spill blood and have an ally now is strategically important. Maybe you can scale that down a tad, but I'm not a fan of giving back the readiness of military presence in case you need it around the world. I think, particularly in a global economy and a geopolitical environment we find ourselves in, shutting down all our bases does not make a lot of sense to me. But I think he is more along the lines of being able to have a strong national defense. He's for a strong military, but he wants transparency. Did you see that? I want to come back because I think because you mentioned the economics thing, and I'm tracking, like, my brain's in two places right now. Right. But it happened the other day. They were recounting a conversation Trump had with the Taliban when they were talking about withdrawal. Because Trump is the one who said he wanted to get out of Afghanistan completely. That was Trump's idea. Right. Biden's execution of it was horrible, clearly. And I don't agree with actually withdrawing at all. Bagram Air Base should stay United States sovereign territory. We should have presence there. And giving that Biden's execution, that was horrible. So I don't agree with Trump at all, withdrawing at all from Afghanistan. We don't have to be in active combat. But giving that back is horrible because now we need it because now we have a terrorist organization as a government. But the story was, and this has been verified, Trump told that Taliban leader that if you spill a drop of American blood, we will find you, we'll hunt you down. They handed him a satellite photo of his house. Said, we know where you live. And got him left me. I'm like, that's, yes, heck yeah. But I think that whole thing, that whole thing is just, I think RFK Trump brings a strong defense altogether. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side, what RFK has really lost some people on, and I know you're going to have some strong opinions on this one, is his stance on abortion. He went from being pretty strongly against it and claiming support for anti-abortion laws, but has since backed off that stance now in support of abortion in some instances. But I think it's that change combined with his unwillingness to stand firm on his prior beliefs that has what's kind of really put him in some hot water and hurt his cause, particularly on the evangelical voter side, which I hate using that word because I think in the political world that word is used wrong. That's why we did an episode on what that is.
Yeah, that's right.
But looking at Christian voters for the most part, where that life is a huge component of how you're voting. Yeah. Him changing his stance on that and the just general fact that he moved is certainly going to lose him some voters. Yeah. It might gain him some on the other side, but what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you've talked a lot about that with him,
with RFK, and he came out. He was on a show where he talked about advocating for abortion all the way up to the last trimester of pregnancy, up through the 9th month, and said he believed that women ought to have the right to choose. Now, Sean Ryan asked him when he had him on to interview him, he asked him about that issue. Now, to his credit, I don't know if it's recognizing the political storm he stepped into with that statement or if recognizing he actually was wrong, but he said he went and did his research, and he said that he discovered that most of those 9th month, 3rd trimester pregnancies were not related to the health of the mom or the baby, but they were in fact convenience. And in that case, he said, I'm not for that. I'm against that. Good for him. However, that's not enough. And even Trump has come to the place where he's for the pill still, which is still an abortifacient. You're killing a human being. And he's putting it back to the states. I don't think, and his whole thing is the people ought to choose. Well, are you going to let us choose whether or not it's okay for me to go murder my neighbor if I don't like him? Like, what? So there's some things that the government should not give us an option to choose on, and that is taking the life of humans unjustly. And the idea of the states getting to choose on whether or not, one of them, what a human is and when we can kill a human, I'm not for either of those. But to Kennedy's credit, he at least addressed it and said he was wrong about that. However, he's still a pro-choice candidate. The bottom line is he is for a woman's right to choose to kill a human being. And what I want to say to all of them is they have a right to choose to not get pregnant. I'm not talking about not have sex. That's number one, make sure you don't get pregnant outside of being married, but there are options to not get pregnant in the first place. Right. And so that choice happens on the front end. And so not after you've irresponsibly gotten pregnant. And so I think that's super, super important that we are able to handle that and deal with that and speak to the truth about it as Christians. And so for me, that's a non-starter. I'm not okay with a candidate that is going to be pro-choice. And Kennedy's pro-choice. The bottom line of that is. And here's the deal. We don't have a real pro-life candidate.
Agreed. And I want to ask you about that too, because I think even Trump has changed some of his stance on that. And that's tough because, you're left with three Trump would call himself a pro-choice candidate. Like, I don't think he would use that terminology.
No, he wouldn't.
But he's not. No, he's clearly not a 100% pro-life candidate either.
Right.
And with that being such an issue, that's tough, because that means, like, well, there are different levels to that. If Biden gets another 4 years, he's been completely open about he's going to do everything he can to undo the Roe v. Wade decision. Mm-hmm. I don't know that RFK would go that far. I don't think he's so much focused on changing that, but clearly he's not pro-life.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
I think he's just trying to find out the right messaging to get him some more votes.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's all of them are doing that.
Yeah.
I think Trump has changed a little bit on his stance because he's trying to get those borderline voters who won't vote for him because he's pro-life,
right?
While trying to keep, because I think he feels like I've got the, you know, the Christian population, the pro-lifers already going to vote for me no matter what, because I'm at least the best option of the three, and I'm going to use air quotes there,
right,
for it. Which, and it's not wrong, but it's everything is shifted there. So what happens there? And what if we are just stuck with all these options? Are like, yeah, we're pro-choice,
right?
I'm like, well, that's a big deal for a lot of us, and
it is.
It's not like that we can do a write-in candidate that's got any chance. So it kind of feels like, well, what do we do?
Yeah, well, you're stuck with having the best. You have to choose the best, most closest to pro-life option that you have if you're a Christian.
I agree.
Now, and again, that's one of those issues that people are actually wrestling with. Like, okay, this is an issue. This is an issue that, because of the way things currently are, Roe has been overturned. The states haven't made decisions yet, so we have a better stance in life than we've had since Roe v. Wade happened. Is this an issue? And this is some people are actually wrestling with this. Can we afford to not make a decision based on that alone right now in order to address some issues that are going to make it better for a pro-life environment? And RFK is making people ask that question right now, because the truth is you don't have a real pro-life candidate, one. Number two, Trump is better than all of them. But if he doesn't address certain other things or bring some sense of unity, are we going to lose the capacity to have a pro-life position at all? Mm-hmm. And that's a question worth asking. Now, I'm going to tell you my personal belief is I have to go with the most pro-life option. That's just me. There's not a pro-choice bone in my body. And so I'm for your choices. Don't get pregnant. Don't shove the consequences of bad decision-making onto a child. And so, but there are people who have legitimate concerns about the republic and being able to preserve a republic that gives us the option of fighting for life. And so, but Kennedy is just not a pro-life candidate.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's that wishy-washy, maybe too strong a word, but we've seen this a lot with other candidates. And again, if you're that independent candidate where, like, you just have a small chance at even being relevant in the election, you know, those guys they're gonna waver on some things at times.
Sure.
I don't think that there's a way around that. I'm not giving him a pass for that. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying it's understandable that you would shift a little bit there. Which kind of, I don't know how much else you have. I kind of wanted to turn it to, like, well, does he have a chance here? Like,
can I go back? I want to address a couple of things.
Let's do that.
His Wikipedia page, you can go look this up. I think it's a hit piece page. Environmental lawyer, anti-vaccine activist, conspiracy theorist, chairman of the Children's Health Defense, which is absolutely which is an actually pretty cool thing. What's interesting here is this language that he's an anti-vaccine activist, and that he's a proponent of COVID-19 misinformation.
Yeah.
Now, if you've listened to him, and I want to say this about Kennedy first and foremost. Of the three candidates, I respect him more than I respect any of them. Mm-hmm. I have a great degree of respect. He's a moral man. He's honest about his past. Like, he is brutally honest about what he's done, what he's been part of, how he's been changed and delivered. He talks a lot of God talk. He claims to be Catholic, claims to be a Christian, but he uses a lot of the Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA language.
Yeah.
So that's fine, whatever. He is no longer, he tells a story. He told it on the Sean Ryan show. He's told it on Rogan's show, how he first got exposed to drugs in the first place, how he got off of them, how he spent his life. And the interesting thing about the vaccine stuff is that he will tell you, if you listen to him and read his book, he is not an anti-vaxxer. Mm-hmm. His question is, when these women would come to his speeches when he's doing environmental law and sit in the front row and wait for him to be done and hand them their white papers on how their kids, and this is when, like in the 70s and the 80s, how their kids were perfectly fine. They started on the vaccine schedule and they regressed and became autistic. And he brings the receipts, he brings the charts of the massive increase of autism and various other challenges correlating with the increase in vaccines. And so I didn't know until I read him that in order to get an immune response from a dead virus vaccine, you have to introduce something that gets your immune system respond, and that is usually aluminum or mercury, which are toxic. Mm-hmm. Now, because a live culture vaccine, you have the risk of actually making the person sick with the disease. So what they do is use a dead culture vaccine and then trick the immune system by having a toxin in there with it. Well, you look up what mercury and aluminum do to the human body, and it starts making sense. Like, it's not rocket science to realize this is probably not the best thing to put in your body. And so he's not an anti-vaxxer. He's just a question on, do we need all of these, and why are we shoving all these in our kids? And so he's not an anti-vaxxer. He's let's put all the information out on the table and let's make them safe. Because he goes back to even when the 80s, when Reagan, under the Reagan administration, when they made it so that vaccine companies couldn't be sued. Mm-hmm. Because there were so many vaccine injuries, and so they weren't making money. So like, we have to have some kind of immunity. So under the Reagan administration, they couldn't sue vaccine companies anymore. So they can produce a vaccine and hold no accountability to what's happening to people taking the vaccine. He just wants transparency. So he's not an anti-vaccine activist, and he's not a conspiracy theorist. He's just a guy that says, if it's untrue or if it's true, show us the documents. But when you don't show us the documents, conspiracy theories thrive, and he's right about that.
Right.
He's also, I think it was interesting about just the things they say about him. So here's what I would say about Kennedy. I think people need to go listen to what he says. The Sean Ryan show, the Joe Rogan podcast, you'll get a ton of information on him. Tucker Carlson's interviewing of him is absolutely fascinating. Let him defend himself. Don't judge him by what the mainstream media says about him, because they don't like him.
Yeah, he's incredibly sharp.
He is.
I didn't know that much about him before, just I would say this year or even before the last several months. But like, just listening to some of those interviews and some of those video clips, like, there's no doubt he's sharp. There's no doubt he knows what he's talking about. He's not blowing smoke. He's really trying to be transparent. I think he's got that. Is it something in his throat that makes him sound like he's
actually, it's a condition. There's a name to it. I didn't look it up before this, and he talked about it on the Joe Rogan show, that he's taking getting some experimental treatment. It's actually his vocal cords tremble when he talks, and it's involuntary.
But it's not like Biden talking.
No, not at all.
I'd be so interested to see the three of them in a debate.
Yeah.
Like, I think if there was ever a time for him to just shine, that would be it.
He knows all this stuff by heart. Like, it is so downloaded to him. He's a brilliant man, and I respect him. I said I respect him morally and intellectually more than I respect the other two. I just can't get with him when it comes to some of the foreign policy and the pro-life position, because he's not a pro-life candidate. But I highly respect him, and so I just encourage people not to judge him based on what mainstream media says about him. Judge him by his own words, because he's a brilliant man, and I do respect him greatly. So I'm not going to vote for him, at least at this point. I'm not going to vote for him unless something massively changes. But I have a high degree of respect for him, and I appreciate he won't trash people. He won't trash Biden or Trump. he disagrees with them and say where he disagrees, but he will not trash them like Biden and Trump trash each other. And I respect that out of the man.
Yeah, I think he's much more respectable than either of the other two candidates.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be as big of a factor, unfortunately.
Right.
He's also been very adamantly against our voter system. He's spoken up a lot about voter fraud issues, and this has been a big topic of conversation because every time there's a debate or something, everybody's trying to get Trump. This happened again. They're trying to get him to say, "Are you going to accept it?" And he's like, well, "If it's fair, yes." And then, well, he didn't say the words, and I'm like, because they know what they're trying to do,
right?
But then again, we just ignore the fact that the Democratic Party has highly questioned the last several Republican winners. I mean, they highly detested Trump winning, and there was a lot of pushback from the Clinton campaign about that. We don't hear as much about that because there wasn't a riot attributed to them.
Right.
But anyway, that's not really important here. I think the biggest question here is A, does he have a chance to win? Or if the answer to that is no, then is he going to have an impact on who wins? I think the answer to that is a yes, but I've got some thoughts on that. But what are your takes on that?
I actually think he has a chance to win. I don't trust polls because so many polls, man. Trump did not have a shot to win, and he won in 2016. I don't trust polls. It depends on the poll you look at. He's trending higher in some certain places. And he's going to be on the ballot in all states. He's done the legwork to get on the ballot as an independent candidate. Yeah. I actually think he has a chance to win. I think it's low, but I think he has a chance because I think people are kind of sick of stuff as it is. Mm-hmm. And I think though he's going to, because the Democrat Party has such a progressive base to it. That I think what he's going to do is hurt the Democrat Party by pulling moderate Democrats over, and I think that will have a great degree of help for Trump to win the election. Again, man, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. I can't foresee that, but that's kind of what I think. I don't think he's going to pull votes from the right. Some he'll pull from the right, particularly fiscally conservative folks in a lot of ways. But I don't think his view on foreign wars, he's going to pull people from the right because what's interesting is how the right and left have shifted in so many things. But I think he'll pull more blue votes than he will red votes. And I think he'll affect the election in regard to Trump winning.
Yeah, I think I don't think he has a chance to win. A lot of that's just because of the Electoral College the way that's set up for him to win an entire state. I think would be very difficult, especially important states. And my gut just says as things get closer to November, they're going to get a lot uglier. And I think what that's going to do, I agree. I think he's going to pull some votes, but I think what's going to happen is people are going to be so conditioned against one of the other sides that it's just going to be hard for people to pull the trigger on that third party.
Yeah.
When I say people, I think this is the majority. I do think he's going to pull votes. I think he's got a chance to get one of the highest percentages of any independent we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years.
Sure.
I just don't see the path for him with the Electoral College winning that percent. So I think the question becomes, and he has a lot of Republican funders behind him, like big. So I do think that there's a good chance he pulls Democrat votes. I think he's going to pull both. Sure. I think he's going to pull a significant amount of both. The question is which way is it going to swing, or is it going to be in the middle where it kind of cancels him out? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And then the other question is, if let's say he does pull a big enough percentage of Democrat votes, does he pull those from the right states? Because we've seen that too. Like if he pulls a bunch of Democrat state voters in a completely red state already, that doesn't really help.
True.
Can he swing a Georgia, Pennsylvania, and I'm not the smartest guy, Ohio, I think, Arizona, some of those, and forgive me if those are wrong, but like those ones that kind of tend to be, certain candidates need to win that state or they're
Sure.
going to lose. And so
you got your Ohio, Pennsylvania, your Florida, the California, which he's never going to win. I mean, Trump's probably not going to win California. Kennedy could win California. Biden's probably going to win California. But here's the deal. Let's just be honest. I don't know that Biden's going to be on the ticket. That's a different podcast.
That is a different podcast.
And it changes the dynamic with RFK.
And it's getting late he can't come off the ballot in some states. He can't be replaced. They passed the deadline in some states.
See, I keep reading different stuff.
I do too, so I'm not sure on that. I get you can replace anybody at any time.
Right.
I heard somebody say that they were trying. Now the latest rumor, because a lot of people keep pushing to Michelle Obama. She's adamant she's not going to run.
Right.
There's no way Kamala Harris is beating Trump. People keep saying she's polling good. No, she's not.
No.
There's no scenario where Kamala Harris wins.
Yeah.
There is what I read yesterday was that people are saying that they're going to try to find a way to replace Kamala as the VP candidate with Barack Obama, and then eventually help. Now, I think that would help the Biden ticket more, and then he gets president and then steps down, and Obama can do another term at a loophole. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying any of this could happen. Yeah. I just think that's where we're at with all these rumors and stuff.
Yeah.
But you're right. But if he is going to get replaced, it does have to be pretty soon. I don't think they can get into August or September. And I just don't know. So let me ask this question to you, and I know we're about to wrap up. If RFK was the Democrat nominee, how do you think that would change the race?
If RFK was the Democrat nominee, he would have a really big chance of beating Trump.
I agree.
Huge chance of beating Trump. I just don't. The progressives in the Democrat Party, I don't think will let that happen.
No, I don't either. I'm not saying it would happen. But it's interesting to think about.
Sure. Well, RFK was posed that question, and he said he would be open to talking to them if they were interested in talking to him. And so that would be a wild scenario. But if he became the Democrat nominee, he would stand a great shot at beating Trump, I think.
Because really, if they removed Biden from the ticket, it seems like Gavin Newsom is probably which I don't think he has a chance either. But I'm just saying,
he looks like a villain from some movie, doesn't he?
Look like Bond Jr. villain or something. But
right.
But I mean, if we're looking at it from a practical standpoint, they're going to try to get some. Mm-hmm. They're going to try to find a name to beat Trump. That's the only reason Biden's running. And that's Biden running is the only reason Trump's running. Yeah. It's sad. What if y'all both just say, shake hands and say we're both out because we're old,
right?
And then let's just
right.
I think we do this. I think we send them to Augusta, let them play 18.
I can't believe
whoever wins that gets to be president.
Dude, they bantered back and forth about that, and then Trump closed it by saying, "Joe, let's not be childish." And I'm like, "Dude, you were just childish." And then you totally hammered him by saying, "Let's not be childish" after you baited him, and it was. Oh man, it's brutal. So you got some Hayes takeaways?
Yeah, I got that. I won't count that as one of them.
On the parachute.
Part of me is gonna be glad to move on from politics, and part of me is kind of gonna be sad because it's sad that it's entertaining in the worst way.
Right.
Let's jump into some Hayes takeaways. I just got two simple ones today. Number one, voting is serious, so take it seriously.
Yeah.
But not too seriously. And what I mean by that is vote with your heart in your head, but realize that life is going to go on. We've survived the last 8 years with these two candidates as president, and while we may not get what we want or like the next 4 years, if our candidate doesn't win, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And number two, just like football season, the ugly side of Christians can come out during election season. So guard your witness and be aware of the things you say and post and how you discuss and debate with others. Representing Jesus well is much more important than trying to win a political debate that you're probably not going to change someone's mind on anyway.
That's good.
That's good.
My
biggest takeaways for today.
I like it, man. Well, guys, we appreciate you listening to Theology in the Dirt. It's a joy to come and talk about these things, chew them up, spit them out for you and with you as we try to figure this stuff out. So I imagine we didn't cover absolutely everything. There's probably plenty that you might have a question about. And so if there's a question about Biden, Trump, or RFK that you'd like us to talk about, hit us up. Send us an email at theologyinthedirt@gmail.com, and we'll take it. We'll come back to it and do our best to address it. Any other topic you'd like us to talk about, hit us up. We'll try to do it. Leave us a 5-star rating. Leave a comment. Share the podcast. Three Rivers Church. Please feel free to do that. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time. Take care, y'all. Out.
You're